At 3:20 a.m., deep inside what Moscow considered an untouchable rear area, two low-cost FPV drones launched from a civilian-marked speedboat and within 7 minutes stripped an $80 million Bayan-M warship of its combat capability, disabling its radar, destroying its missile launch control, and forcing it off station. This is the step-by-step, time-stamped account of how a tightly rehearsed asymmetric strike neutralized a high-value naval asset with weapons that cost less than 1% of the target. At 3:20 a.m., the Bayan-M warship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet was moored at Military Pier No. 2 in Teryak Bay. The ship had returned from a strategic caliber strike mission and was in resupply mode, refueling, activating cooling systems, and reloading 8-caliber NK cruise missiles. Each missile was assigned a unit cost in excess of $1 million and a range exceeding 950 miles, giving the vessel the ability to reach urban centers deep in Ukraine. Officers and crew were conducting routine post-mission procedures. A group of officers gathered on deck was observed raising glasses. Combat crew were rotating through rest shifts, and some personnel had slept at control stations. Approximately 6 miles from the pier, a civilian-marked high-speed boat approached the bay. From the outside, it resembled a standard fishing vessel. Inside the cockpit, however, 2 personnel from Ukraine's 73rd Naval Center were dressed in fishing jackets and Russian-style fisherman caps. In the storage compartment normally used for fish were 2 Beaver model FPV suicide drones configured for heavy attack. Each carried an 8-pound armor-piercing warhead, night vision cameras, and an internal navigation system that operated independently of GPS. The vessel type and operational environment are important to note. The Bayan-M is a compact strike platform optimized for semi-enclosed, shallow and narrow waters such as the Sea of Azov. It lacks the size of helicopter-carrying surface combatants and the layered long-range air defenses of capital ships, but it is nonetheless a strategic long-range strike platform because of its caliber NK missile loadout. Every deployment by a vessel like the Bayan-M introduced strategic risk for Ukrainian infrastructure nodes. Kyiv assessed these risks and, for this operation, elected to strike preemptively. Teryak Bay's defenses were deliberately dense. The port and its approaches were protected by a layered air defense network described in the account as including a Pantsir S-1 system, noted for short-range intercept capability against UAVs and cruise missiles, and 2 Podlet K, 1 radar installations operating continuously. In practical terms, this meant the defensive posture around the pier relied on active radar coverage, short-range kinetic interceptors, and redundant sensor suites, a configuration that would detect and engage most conventional aerial threats. Ukraine's operational concept exploited a specific vulnerability: the radar blind zone that exists at extremely low altitudes skimming the sea surface. The attackers calculated timing precisely and elected to use a method that would present the lowest probability of detection by the Podlet and Pantsir sensors. The cost asymmetry is central to the operation. The FPV UAV-S used cost a fraction of a single caliber missile, yet targeted the ship's most critical nodes: the surveillance radar and the missile launch area. At 3:27 a.m., with the speedboat approximately 3 miles from the target and at the outer edge of Teryak Port's surveillance ring, the 2 operators prepared for launch. Gray camouflage tarps covering the rear compartment were removed and 2 FPV drones were revealed. Dimensions and configuration were recorded. Each drone approximately 4 feet in length with a 5.5 feet wingspan. Fiberglass composite airframes, ultralight construction, and a matte gray, low thermal signature finish to reduce visual and infrared detectability. The drone's propulsion was electric and configured for high-speed, low-altitude transit. The drones were deployed in a dual-strike model with 2 approach vectors and separate, synchronized targets. The first drone, identified in the account by the call sign Thunder and deployed by the primary group, was programmed to target the surveillance radar tower, with the explicit aim of temporarily blinding the vessel's sensor suite. The second drone, codenamed Vid Plata Retribution and operated by HUR Special Operations Forces, was tasked to approach from a 30-degree offset on the right flank and strike the Caliber missile launcher and associated fire control center amidships. At 3:29:12 a.m., the first UAV launched from the stern rail. Its electric motor engaged within seconds, and the UAV accelerated, maintaining an altitude of no more than 7 feet above the water surface. The second drone launched 40 seconds later. During transit, both drones flew roughly 200 feet apart laterally to reduce the chance of simultaneous detection and to maintain separation for independent targeting. The small size, low-altitude profile, and coordinated timing were deliberate choices intended to exploit the radar and sensor geometry of the port's defenses. The control architecture for the attack combined autonomous and operator-guided elements. The drones used internal navigation algorithms, inertial measurement sensors, and infrared FPV feeds. They did not rely on GPS as a single point of failure. An operator in a control bunker near Zaporia monitored a black and white FPV feed and provided final timing and steering inputs. The account emphasizes the silence and discipline in the control room. A single operator watching the approaching target. Distance readouts decrementing from 950 feet toward impact. At 3:31:25 a.m., the first drone impacted the main radar mast. The engagement timeline and immediate effects are recorded in detail. A bright flash and a white plume were observed on the mast, followed almost instantaneously by flames erupting on both sides of the structure and shrapnel dispersing across the deck. The description notes that within 0.7 seconds of impact, the vessel's central surveillance and navigation system shut down. The main antenna assembly was torn from its rotation shaft and flung across the deck. The signal transmitter shorted out, sending sparks into adjacent compartments. Auxiliary sensor clusters were heat damaged, and the central data processor experienced a catastrophic failure despite EMI shielding. The net effect was tactical blindness. The Bayan M lost its primary sensor and processing capability. The ship's commander issued an immediate procedural response. Run a fast diagnostic on the sensors, possible electronic warfare attack. That call was consistent with standard damage control and electronic warfare protocol, where crews must immediately determine whether systems are being jammed, spoofed, or physically damaged. Diagnostic attempts failed. The Panzer S-1 close-in defense system, effective out to roughly 2.5 to 3.5 miles, required manual activation and a functional sensor control link to operate correctly. With the main command center damaged, manual engagement commands could not be reliably executed. The first strike produced additional cascading effects. Structural damage to the command tower allowed debris, dust, and hot gases into confined spaces. Cabin temperatures rose, and human casualties occurred. An antenna shard penetrated an observation window and struck a radar officer in the left chest, reported critically injured. The account records that within 10 seconds, the ship's defensive crew was in disarray, and command capability was degraded to the point that core defense systems were not instantly usable. 6 seconds after radar impact, at 3:31:31 a.m., the second UAV, Vid Plata, approached from the port side at nearly 95 miles per hour, skimming the water. With the primary radar non-functional and optical sensors obscured by blast-induced dust and debris, alarms in the auxiliary control room registered the contact too late for an effective Panzer engagement. The FPV feed from Vid Plata provided a targeting window into the centerline launch bays. Observers saw rectangular launch hatches. Heat signatures suggested at least 2 missiles were in pre-launch mode. Vid Plata's target selection was precise. Launch Bay number 3, which held a caliber NK already set toward pre-launch. At 3:32 a.m., Vid Plata impacted Launch Bay 3. The collision produced a powerful explosion that blew the hatch clear, sent a column of thick black smoke hundreds of feet into the air, and ruptured the center deck. Steel plating bent, and fragments became projectiles across the deck. The ship's automatic fire suppression systems initiated. Carbon dioxide valves discharged across deck areas to suppress flames and lower temperatures. Nevertheless, critical internal systems were compromised. The launch control module burned, and the adjacent electrical bays overheated rapidly, elevating the risk of sympathetic secondary explosions in neighboring missile canisters and systems. The operational outcome was rapid. Within minutes, the Bayan M developed a significant list, recorded between 3 and 5 degrees to starboard, indicating internal flooding or weight redistribution caused by structural failure or ruptured compartments. Crew initiated emergency damage control procedures, sealing emergency valves, switching remaining systems to manual mode, and conducting on-deck inspections. The ship did not sink. However, the combined effects of sensor loss, fire, damage to the launch control, and internal systems rendered it tactically unusable. Radioed messages within the Black Sea Fleet referenced the hit. An M warship B-38 was attacked, radar damaged, caliber system damaged, requesting support and tow back to Terry. Operationally, the Bayan M was compelled to withdraw from its assigned post in the Azov theater less than 7 minutes after the dual strike. The tactical significance is grounded in the operational ecology of the Sea of Azov. Semi-enclosed and shallow waters favor the employment of small-class strike vessels like the Bayan M, which can operate closer to shorelines and under tactical concealment while projecting long-range strike power via caliber missiles. Removing even a single strike platform from the order of battle reduces immediate ballistic and cruise missile threat vectors for Ukrainian infrastructure and forces. Ukraine's Defense Intelligence Directorate released UAV footage hours after the incident, showing the moment of impact on the radar mast and the subsequent deck strike. The released imagery, corroborated according to the transcript by a set of outlets listed as Naval News, Kiev Post, Business Insider, and the Kyiv Independent, was independently verified by several naval analysts. The reported assessment concluded the attack inflicted both direct kinetic damage and immediate strategic consequences across the Sea of Azov. The Bayan M was reported to have been ordered back to Sevastopol for assessment and repairs, a process estimated to require several weeks, depending on the extent of damage and the recoverability of digital infrastructure. Contextualizing the strike within broader trends. The transcript references prior Ukrainian drone operations in late 2024 and throughout 2025 that used improvised UAVs to disable or sink Russian naval assets. Examples cited include the disabling of a Sergei Kotov-class patrol boat off Crimea and the sinking of a Cesar Kunov-class landing ship during a drone-based amphibious strike. Additionally, a July 2025 sea-launched FPV strike targeted an offshore oil rig used as a radar station. Taken together, these examples illustrate a doctrinal shift from ad hoc ramming-style employment to systematically planned, rehearsed, and synchronized multi-asset operations that exploit sensor blind spots and the cost asymmetry between small unmanned systems and legacy naval platforms. Operational analysis of this specific action highlights several recurring principles. First, target selection focused on critical nodes, sensors and launch systems, rather than attempting to sink or disable the entire hull. By removing the ship's eyes, radar, and neutralizing its primary offensive system, caliber launch control, attackers achieved mission objectives without expending the resources required for a full ship kill. Second, redundancy and manual activation limitations in the defending architecture were exploited. The Pantsir S1 system required manual engagement procedures that could not be completed under conditions of command center failure and smoke/temperature overload. Third, the coordination between operator-guided FPV feeds and autonomous navigation allowed precise terminal impact in congested maritime environments at night. Strategically, the cost-to-effect ratio is stark. The transcript notes the strike succeeded at less than 1% of the target's value, a force multiplier outcome when assessed against the ship's operational removal from patrol duties. The psychological and operational repercussions are also noted. The attack undermined Russian assumptions of safe rear area anchorage within the Azov interior and forced a re-evaluation of how small-class strike vessels are sheltered, refueled, and rearmed. Finally, the longer-term implication is doctrinal. FPV drone employment, when integrated into coordinated maritime strike packages and conducted with rehearsal, accurate targeting data, and timing discipline, becomes more than a tactical novelty. It becomes a persistent, asymmetric capability that increases risk for any vessel operating in semi-enclosed coastal waters, where low-altitude approaches can exploit sensor geometry and manual control procedures. From this incident forward, any Russian vessel operating in the area, whether a Bayan-M, a Cherna-class, or a logistics vessel, must face the operational reality that low-cost unmanned systems present an ever-present threat that can temporarily or permanently remove high-value assets from the theater at a fraction of the cost.